Meghan thought the birthday post would be seen as a sweet family moment. Instead, one unexpected detail exploded into a controversy that nobody inside her camp seemed prepared for. Because this was not just about a photo of little Lilibet. This was about timing. This was about a speech. And according to critics, this was about a contradiction that came racing back only days later and caught Meghan's entire team off guard. 18 days. That number has become the center of the entire storm. Just 18 days before the photographs appeared online, Meghan stood in Geneva speaking about children's safety in the digital age. It was a serious setting, a serious audience, serious warnings. She spoke about algorithms, online dangers, and the way children can become vulnerable in a world built around attention and engagement. For supporters, it was a passionate speech from a mother concerned about modern technology. For critics, it became something very different once the birthday pictures arrived, because the moment those new images of Lilibet appeared on Instagram, people immediately began comparing the two events. And suddenly, the conversation changed. Not about birthdays, not about family, not even about the photographs themselves. The conversation became about whether Meghan had accidentally walked straight into a controversy she should have seen coming.
Shameless grifters! This is a new low. Harry and Meghan have been blasted for their wild hypocrisy in doing speeches around the world about the dangers of the internet and social media, particularly regarding children, while splashing photographs of Archie and Lily all over social media.
This is totally bonkers. Meghan Markle has decided to use the 5th birthday of her own daughter to lash out while claiming to be the hero for protecting children from social media. We see you, Meghan, and your angry statement ain't going to shut us up.
The birthday message looked simple enough on the surface. A loving tribute, a proud mother celebrating her daughter, a few carefully selected photographs, a sweet caption, the kind of post that social media sees every single day. But Meghan is not just another mother posting family pictures. Every move she makes is analyzed. Every caption is examined. Every photograph becomes a headline. And within hours, critics were already asking questions. Why now? Why these photos? Why so soon after Geneva? The question spread quickly. Then something happened that made the entire situation even bigger. Reports began emerging that Meghan's camp already had a response prepared, before criticism had fully exploded, before the debate had reached its peak, before some outlets had even published their reactions. A defense was reportedly ready, and that immediately fueled speculation that Meghan's team knew exactly how controversial the photos might become. That detail alone transformed a simple birthday tribute into something much larger, because when a response appears ready before the backlash fully arrives, people start wondering whether everyone involved already expected trouble. Then came the criticism. Royal commentators, columnists, television personalities, social media users. Everybody seemed to jump into the argument at once. Some claimed the photographs directly contradicted the message delivered in Geneva. Others argued that the two situations were completely different. Supporters insisted Meghan had protected her daughter by limiting what was shown. Critics insisted the distinction didn't matter. And suddenly the entire internet was fighting over a single question. Can you warn about children's exposure online while also posting your own child's image online? The debate exploded.
Children are no longer just participants in digital spaces. They are too often the product. They didn't know that the platforms valued profit over people. We would never accept a food system that knowingly exposed children to harm.
But Meghan Markle, are you seriously saying, despite that rhetoric, that your 5-year-old daughter is giving you permission to share her image for money? I think there's nothing wrong with parents sharing their children online. But remember, Prince Harry has called it evil. He has attacked parents who are doing exactly what you would do.
What made the situation even more dramatic was the way different outlets described the exact same photographs. Some reports claimed Lilibet's privacy had been carefully protected. Others described the images as some of the clearest glimpses ever shared publicly. The contradiction became impossible to ignore. How could both things be true? How could one side describe the images as highly protective while another described them as unusually revealing? And that is where the leak truly began creating problems, because the photographs themselves were no longer the story. The reaction was, the timing was, the comparisons were, and critics refused to let the Geneva speech disappear from the conversation. Again and again, they returned to those 18 days. 18 days days between warning the world about digital dangers and posting new family content. 18 days between concern and celebration. 18 days that suddenly seemed to dominate every discussion surrounding the Duchess. Then came another unexpected twist. Instead of quietly letting the criticism fade away, the response from Meghan's side appeared to reinforce the argument. The explanation centered on a distinction between sharing family moments and exposing children to public scrutiny. That became the official defense. Supporters immediately embraced it. They argued that Meghan was doing exactly what she had advocated all along, sharing carefully controlled moments while protecting her children's identities. But critics were not convinced, not even close. They argued that once a photograph reaches millions of followers, the distinction becomes harder to defend. And the more people debated the explanation, the bigger the controversy became. What should have been a birthday celebration was now being discussed as a public relations battle. A battle nobody expected to become this intense. A battle Meghan's team suddenly found themselves fighting on multiple fronts at once. And that's where things became truly fascinating, because some observers began suggesting that the real problem wasn't the photo, it wasn't the caption, it wasn't even the speech, it was the pattern, the perception, the growing belief among critics that Meghan wants privacy and publicity at the same time. Whether that belief is fair or unfair hardly mattered anymore. The perception had already taken hold, and perception often becomes reality in the court of public opinion. The more commentators discussed it, the more attention the story received. The more attention it received, the more people went looking for older examples, older posts, older interviews, older statements. Everything suddenly became part of the same narrative, a narrative that critics were building piece by piece, and every new article seemed to add another layer. Meanwhile, supporters continued pushing back. They argued that a parent has every right to share family milestones. They argued that one carefully managed birthday post should not be compared to the dangers discussed in Geneva. They argued that critics were deliberately creating a contradiction where none existed. But by then, the debate had taken on a life of its own. The internet had chosen its battlefield, and nobody was backing down. What makes this entire situation so explosive is that both sides believe they are absolutely right. One side sees hypocrisy, the other sees protection. One side sees exposure, the other sees family pride. One side sees contradiction, the other sees consistency. And right in the middle of it all sits Meghan, facing questions that continue growing louder with every passing day. The birthday photos were supposed to celebrate Lilibet. Instead, they triggered a conversation that reached far beyond a single family moment. A conversation about privacy, a conversation about publicity, a conversation about influence, and most importantly, a conversation about whether people should judge actions differently when they come from someone who recently stood on a global stage warning others about the very issue now being debated. The deeper this controversy went, the more uncomfortable the questions became. Because once people stopped arguing about a single birthday post, they started looking at the broader picture. They started asking whether this was really an isolated moment or part of a larger pattern that has followed Meghan for years. And that is exactly where the pressure on her team reportedly intensified. Think about it. If the goal was simply to celebrate Lilibet's birthday, why did the reaction become so explosive? Why were commentators still talking about it days later? Why did articles continue appearing across multiple platforms? The answer, according to critics, is because the post touched a nerve that had already been exposed by the Geneva speech. The speech created expectations. The photographs created questions. And when those two things collided, the internet did what it always does. It chose sides and turned the entire situation into a battlefield. What makes this story even more fascinating is that nobody seems willing to retreat. Meghan's supporters remain convinced that she did absolutely nothing wrong. They point out that countless parents share photographs of their children every day. They argue that she carefully controls what is shown. They insist that protecting a child's face is a meaningful step toward privacy. To them, the criticism is unfair, exaggerated, and driven by people determined to find fault no matter what she does. But critics look at the same situation and reach the exact opposite conclusion. They argue that if privacy is truly the priority, then the simplest solution would be complete absence. No birthday photos, no carefully staged glimpses, no strategic releases, no public debates, just privacy. And because Meghan chose to share the images, they believe she willingly stepped into into a contradiction she can no longer easily explain away. That disagreement is what keeps this story alive. The strange thing is that the birthday photographs themselves are no longer the center of the controversy. The images have almost become secondary. What people are really debating is trust. Trust in the message. Trust in the messenger. Trust in whether actions match words. And once a conversation shifts into that territory, it becomes much harder to control. Meanwhile, royal watchers noticed another detail. The response from Meghan's camp wasn't defensive in the traditional sense. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a clarification. It was a firm insistence that nothing inconsistent had happened at all. That confidence surprised many observers, because usually when public figures face accusations of contradiction, they try to soften the conversation. Here, critics felt they were being told the opposite, that the speech and the photographs were perfectly aligned, and that claim only encouraged even more scrutiny. Suddenly, people were revisiting interviews, revisiting old statements, revisiting previous social media posts. Every past decision became evidence for one side or the other. Every photograph became part of a larger argument. Every public appearance was re-examined through a new lens. For Meghan's team, that may be the most frustrating part of all, because the original intention of the post has almost disappeared beneath layers of analysis and debate. What began as a birthday celebration became a media storm. What began as a family moment became a public controversy. And what began as a simple Instagram post turned into a discussion about credibility itself. The most remarkable part? This entire saga was triggered by a gap of just 18 days. 18 days between a warning and a photograph. 18 days between a speech and a social media post. 18 days that critics refuse to stop talking about. And that is why this story continues making headlines. Not because of what was posted, but because of what came before it. Not because people are focused on Lilibet, but because they are focused on Meghan's choices. The new leak didn't just reveal another photograph. It reopened an argument that many thought had already been settled. Now the debate is bigger than ever, the criticism is louder than before, and the questions surrounding that 18-day timeline continue hanging over the entire story. Whether Meghan's supporters see a protective mother or her critics see a damaging contradiction, one thing is impossible to deny: this birthday post created exactly the kind of attention that nobody inside her camp seems to have expected. And judging by how fiercely both sides are still arguing, this controversy may be far from over.